Today's discussion distinguishes between the concept of drifting, as discussed in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, and flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Now, this conversation is actually a result of a number of conversations that I've been having about this particular topic, the distinction. And I believe it is very important for us to maintain a degree of flow. And one of the reasons why is because this is how we remain connected to our intuition. Now, the reality is we always have the connection. It's just perhaps overthinking or excessive convoluted ideas seem to cloud the connection in which we automatically know how to express effortlessly, wu wei. Now, in Outwitting the Devil, the conversation stated, I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift, while those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. So let's hone in on that one. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by the circumstances outside of his own mind. He would rather let me occupy his mind and do his thinking than go to the trouble of thinking for himself. So intuition means that we are guided from within and we receive the hunches, interpretations, beliefs, information from within ourselves. We're recognizing and relating over to our Neville Goddard discussions, in which reality is an expression of what is within mind, and everything is found within mind. Acres of diamonds is the mind. It's a treasure house. All answers can be found within. He also says, I break down independent thought and start people on the habit of drifting by confusing their minds with unprovable ideas concerning a world in which they know nothing. So we say this, when you commit to a goal or a vision or a definite chief aim, we receive ideas, hunches, and inspirations within ourselves. And our goal is to take these ideas and see them all the way to completion. So we create projects, tasks, or do those things in a way that allows us to express. It's a creative expression. Just as an artist would express, just as a musician, who is also an artist, would express, an entrepreneur or a communicator who expresses authentically from the vision. We have the ability to see something in our mind's eye and describe it with vivid detail. We can describe what we see in our imagination. And a poet or an artist can express it in a creative way, what they see in imagination. Now, that's what we call independent thought. It's individualized thought related to the vision. And there's clarity in that expression. We find ourselves automatically expressing. That's what happens when we are in flow. So we could say that drifting is where we feel disconnected from our intuitive guidance within during expression. And one of our goals is to get back into that connection. We'll talk about that in a moment. And by the way, I'm going to add this to my Flow series. This is going to be part of the discussions in my Flow playlist. And if you haven't watched that series of videos, I recommend watching it. I'll put a link in the description, but this will be one that I'll add to it. He also says, I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. I do not mind people thinking as long as they think in terms of fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. When they begin to think in constructive terms of faith, courage, hope, and definiteness of purpose, they immediately become allies of my opposition and are therefore lost to me. So this conflict is going on within ourselves. And it doesn't have to be a conflict. As we maintain the flow and intuitive guidance within and trust ourselves and see those items into completion, it becomes a habit. See, one of the things that we want to do is we want to form habits. And I would suggest that you would form accurate habits that relate over to your goals, your visions, so you could live how you really want to live, which is expressive of your visions, your goals. He also says, I cause people to drift into inharmonious and unpleasant environments in the home, in their places of occupation, in their relationships with relatives and acquaintances, and to remain there until I claim them through the habit of drifting. So a person might become reactive or heavily identified with certain aspects in the five sensory world, in which we relate this over to people, environment, circumstance, and information, in which they identify in a way where they feel limited, disempowered. Remember, it says, a drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. So perhaps in those moments, the person forgets that all power is found within. And we can release from that identification of thinking, and flow is an excellent way of doing it. Let's talk about that and actually tie in what we discussed just now in relation to outwitting the devil. Now, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi has some interesting quotes we want to reflect upon before we get into aspects of flow. He says, to overcome the anxieties and depressions of contemporary life, individuals must become independent of the social environment to the degree that they no longer respond exclusively in terms of its rewards and punishments. To achieve such autonomy, a person has to learn to provide rewards to herself. She has to develop the ability to find enjoyment and purpose regardless of external circumstances. So while we're in flow, and there's different degrees of flow, a person can be more in a lighter flow, let's say when you're cleaning up your place, or you're putting together a puzzle, or reading a book, or going for a walk in nature. See, the very task at hand, the very thing that we're doing, is exactly where we want to be. And we're not overthinking. Perhaps there's some thinking, but there are intuitive ideas, hunches, inspiration, creative ways of looking at challenges, ideas and thoughts of being grateful for the different aspects of life. Again, received within via intuition, recognizing, again, that the answers are found within. Now, if a person becomes identified heavily with certain reactivity-based thinking, they may start to blame the outer world and environments and relate it over to the thinking within. And we want to step away from that. And the way we do that is to maintain a certain degree of presence of mind and harmony between the inner and outer. So, as he says, develop the ability to find enjoyment and purpose regardless of the external circumstances. We relate this over to flow because the very task at hand, the project at hand, the very thing that we're doing, as mentioned, it could be something like going for a walk or doing some gardening, or it could be something like working on your business or painting or sculpting or songwriting or whatever it is that you do creatively. And this can be applied for, even as I've been experiencing this myself, with what you would call some of the most mundane tasks, such as a morning routine, or doing the dishes, even brushing your teeth. One can find themselves from the perspective of deep engagement in that moment if they make flow a priority. Otherwise, they might start overthinking. We call this having lack of presence. And that overthinking could lead to certain thought processes, which then brings us into different states of mind. and different states of being. And as a result of that, we see the theater play out in our life, in our relationships with others, our day-to-day journey, and we wonder why it happens. The source is within ourselves, and those are the things we are identifying with, saying, I am too. He also says, optimal experience is thus something that we make happen. For a child, it could be placing with trembling fingers the last block on a tower she has built, higher than any she has built so far. For a swimmer, it could be trying to beat his own record. For a violinist, mastering an intricate musical passage. For each person, there are thousands of opportunities, challenges to expand ourselves. So, flow is a way to expand ourselves and realize the potentialities to express within. The ideas, the hunches, the inspirations. He also says the mystique of rock climbing is climbing. You get to the top of a rock, glad it's over, but really wish it would go on forever. The justification of climbing is climbing. Like the justification of poetry is writing. You don't conquer anything except things in yourself. So we do it because we want to do it. Why are you doing it? You don't have to add reasons after that. You do it because you want to do it. Feel it. Intuition. You know. In my years of consulting and working with others, I realized that everybody that I spoke with knows exactly what to do. They always know the first step. Now, that might be some overthinking going on in their mind, and they're not listening to the intuition which gives them the first step. And so a conversation or a release from certain kinds of thinking process, through perhaps a meditation or a walk, bringing themselves more in a flow-based state of mind, reveals that idea, and they know exactly what it is to do next. And they do that thing, and they end up in momentum, which is why I also encourage maintaining momentum. So he says, the act of writing justifies poetry. Climbing is the same, recognizing that you are a flow. The purpose of the flow is to keep on flowing. You move up to keep the flow going. There is no possible reason for climbing except the climbing itself. It is a self-communication. So we may climb because we want to break our records or we want to improve the skill. What we want to also identify with is the moment of climbing, the very activity of climbing. For climbing itself, so we do the things because that's the end in itself, to do the thing. Now, this may take a little practice. Certainly it was for me, because in my earlier stages of my journey, I found myself overthinking a lot. I always had to have an excessive reason for doing something, rather than just allowing myself to be. Now, there's a nuance here, because the reality is you'll end up doing the thing that is ideal. And we know it intuitively by how we feel. So the distinction here between this relation to flow versus drifting is we are thinking for ourselves. We're finding the answers within ourselves. We know exactly what it is that we want to do. Now, a person might have certain kinds of inaccurate thinking in which they've formed a self-image, in which they say, I can't do this because of this and that. And we'll get into that in a moment, which will relate over to The 6 Basic Fears by Napoleon Hill from his book, Think and Grow Rich. A good guide to help us categorize conceptually and then make peace with those elements so we can allow ourselves to express the way we really want to express, which is authentic and true to the vision. That's what we call accurate thinking. He also says people who learn to control their inner experience will be able to determine the quality of their lives. So this is all inner experience. Internal thinking, thought processes, identification, imagining, which is translated over to the behavioral expression, the engagement in what we're doing. It's a state of mind. It's a way of being It's a way of life. And it's a way of life that will allow you to maintain that flow, different degrees of flow. As I said, it could be a laid-back flow, going for a walk, maybe some gardening. Or it could be one that is more in the zone, perhaps surfing, snowboarding, or public speaking, or something where you are challenged by the experience, but however, you want to enjoy that challenge. And this is something that you feel. You feel it. Notice certain activities, certain projects, certain experiences in your life. Remember, when you used to find that flow, feeling it, even though there was challenge, even though there was adversity, even if it felt overwhelming, you wanted to be there. Having emerged from that experience successful, overcoming the challenge, transmuting the problem into a solution, the challenge into wisdom, you enjoyed, in retrospect, the process. You look back at that and say, I want to do that again. Now, these are the kinds of things that we experience, and we can experience more so. And what this does is it allows us to maintain in the flow. So if we tie back over here, it says, I do not mind people think as long as they think in terms of fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. That's the dialogue in the Outwitting the Devil. What you'll find is you'll automatically think constructive, faith, courage, and definiteness of purpose. And you won't find yourself thinking in relation to fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. And if, for whatever the reason may be, those thoughts show up, we see them as opportunities. So we can change our thinking surrounding those attributes. If they're persistent. If they're not persistent, as a person maintains the flow, what they will find is they will think more thoughts. A way of being will be thoughts of, I find purpose and meaning in this task, in this project right now. As Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi stated, the purpose of the flow is to keep on flowing. You move up to keep the flow going. Now, I'll speak from experience on this. I remember in 2017, I've shared this story a number of times. I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and I was on vacation. And I reflected back on my journey, my entrepreneurial journey, my journey in life in so many different areas. And I realized that during the times where I was in flow, I was the most lighthearted, productive, effective. I was a lot more engaging in my conversations. I was a lot more fun to be around when it comes to hanging out with others, as well as being on my own. I was totally fine doing things on my own, and I was having a great time. It was during those days and weeks and months when I was in that flow. And I found that it was easy for me to be able to switch from a very cranial task, like maybe working on some spreadsheets, to going out with some friends and hanging out and being very engaged and social and lighthearted and fun. I wasn't stuck in my head. It was easy for me to make that transition because I made, during those times prior, without consciously making an effort of doing it, for whatever the reason may be, flow was made a priority. So I said to myself, I remember the day, 2017, Playa del Carmen, I said, I'm going to make flow a priority from this day forward and see what happens. Because if I look back and I say that's where I had the most joy, happiness, fulfillment, and all the things that I was looking for. And also the results, key performance indicators, both qualitative and quantitative, everything was increasing, was in flow. What if I make it a priority? And I started to notice everything started to accelerate. Business growth. I started to become more of who I am, more expressive, more creative. I also started to find that I started to enjoy certain things that, for whatever the reason, I never realized that I enjoyed before or never allowed myself to enjoy it because perhaps of drifting-based thinking, like performing arts or certain kinds of activities. I got into snowboarding a couple years back different things like that. The journey just kept continuing. I made it a priority. Now, I recommend watching my flow series because I did a bunch of things to ensure that my day is as flow-based as possible. And keeping into consideration as well that there are different levels of flow. There's more of a peak flow. I feel that very much when I'm doing an activity where I get into the zone, deep into the zone. You know, these videos are more in that, let's say, zone area. Or when I do some consulting or something in leadership, I get into the zone. Or if I'm innovating. When I'm doing things like going for a walk, or I'm putting away the dishes, or I'm just doing things that we would say are everyday things, I still maintain a lightheartedness. And that's because flow has been made into a habit. So the beautiful thing about this is this becomes a way of life. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi outlined a number of things, attributes of flow. Number one, clear goals at an abstract and granular level, such as a person says, well, I'm going to achieve this business goal. I'm going to make X amount of dollars per month or a year. Now, they get lighthearted about it because they've committed to it and they assume it is done. Now, when they assume it is done, they receive ideas, hunches, and inspirations within, whatever it is. And they commit to doing those things in relation to. Now, another way of working with this is to maybe have a task list or a list of items, because if flow is the priority, and getting into flow and maintaining it is the key to making this a way of being, then one of the things that helped me when I committed to it is reflecting back at all those times where I was in flow more often. I had to go back and say, what were the characteristics that made it so? And I share it all throughout these videos, but one of the things that was helpful for me was to just sequence my tasks, the different projects and tasks, and just say, I'm going to do each task till it's complete. And my goal is to find that the task is meaningful on its own for the sake of doing it, for the project, or the project was meaningful for the sake of doing it. And then once I'm done, I'm just going to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's how I'm going to go about doing it day to day. And what I found is that my mind couldn't drift. I developed a higher degree of concentration and the ability to focus my will on certain things I'm doing, which helps me tremendously when it comes to not drifting, because thoughts to just pop into my mind right now, and those thoughts being unrelated to my goals, my visions, how I aspire to be, I just simply release them and go back to what I'm doing. And I'm doing this in a very lighthearted way, engaging way. Number two, immediate reporting and feedback. Now, all these characteristics don't have to be there. Although this conversation is related to what can be done in relation to, we take the different elements from this conversation, like in all my videos, that are relatable to you, that resonate with you, and you integrate it if it resonates with you, because I trust your intuition, that you know the answers, and what resonates with you, you can apply. Next is immediate reporting and feedback, qualitative indicators, and quantitative indicators. So qualitative indicator, the number one for me is how I feel. That's it. Simple. How I feel. I want to feel lighthearted. I want to feel in flow. And if things show up, then I'll talk about in a moment how I change it. But that's what I want. Quantitative indicators. So I could have KPIs. How much you lift at the gym, how much you weigh, how much you earn today, your monthly income goals, how many sales you've made. There could be different number-based quantitative indicators. And as mentioned, you don't have to have these, whichever ones resonate with you. A harmony between challenge and skill. So if something seems too challenging and overwhelming, break it down into small tasks, small parts that make up the whole. Take the project, which may seem extremely overwhelming, and break it down into small tasks that when you've completed the task, you've completed the project. For example, when I created my training programs, my 5 training programs, that's exactly what I did. And so I just put together a project plan. I said, okay, first I'm going to create the mind map outline, and then I'm going to record the first video, and then while I'm recording the videos, I'm going to create the workbook, and then I'm going to edit the videos. And it's just a step-by-step process. And within a little while, depending on whatever it is that you're doing, you complete the whole project. But if you had to look at all the parts, it may be overwhelming. Maybe not for everybody. But if it does, you break it down. Now, when you're in flow, we experience action and awareness becoming one. We notice that this is automatic. We automatically do things. We automatically, as a result of making flow a priority, do the things that are optimal, ideal. Now, this is very powerful because I've observed people that I know who are very good when it comes to sales. And they automatically want to start connecting with their prospects and having conversations. And they find so much meaning in that very task that they make that a priority. So they change their schedule around. They automate or delegate or eliminate the things that aren't necessarily flow enhancers to them. And they prioritize the activities that enhance their flow, activities that they find flow in. So the moments when they're engaged in these activities, action and awareness becomes one. They feel one with their experience. Now, as a result, distractions are automatically excluded out of consciousness. Thought processes that one could identify with are automatically released. We let them be, let them pass, such as fear thoughts, doubt, indecision. Time even starts to get distorted to high degrees. As I made this a priority, I noticed that it was actually quite effective. I had a lot of fun. I made a lot of progress. I had a lot of interesting experiences. Time is distorted. Time and space, distortion. And the activity in the person becomes autotelic. They become so one with. So what we want to do is make this a priority by picking tasks, projects, activities in relation to our goals, our visions, or whatever it is that we would like to do, and do it from a place of flow, and keep these aspects into consideration. And what we want to do is not fight this drifting-based interpretations or drifting, to not fight it, but rather be a little bit more lighthearted and playful around it. And by making flow a priority, and again, watch my whole flow series, what happens is a person automatically maintains the flow. So the distinction between flow and drifting is a person goes into positions of overthinking, overwhelm, frustration, anger with others, anger within themselves, and they seem to be spinning their wheels and going around in circles. They even seem to be encouraging those thought processes by automatically finding themselves in certain environments, circumstances, and experiences that seem to encourage within themselves that thinking. And the thinking is really within, and the seeming is from within: fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. And so we want to make it a priority by committing first in your mind that flow is the way. Flow is the priority. I make flow a priority, because that's what I did in 2017. I just committed to it. And then everything started to change. And I live more in flow each day than ever before. And yes, I could have flow breakers, which I consider things that break my flow. But as we've been discussing, those things that break our flow are things related to certain thinking patterns, belief systems, interpretations, perspectives, paradigms within ourselves. So that's where I benefit from cause and effect reflections. Effect being flow broken, and cause within, because all change happens within. We change everything within. So the way we do this is we observe. We keep an inventory. Keep a journal with you, or reflect upon it at the end of the day. Identify any flow breakers, things that broke your flow. You'll feel it. You'll feel that you're out of flow. And usually, we can relate this over to what Napoleon Hill shared in Think and Grow Rich, the 6 basic fears: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. Now, we want to recognize that it's not the fear. It's okay to have fear. It's what Joseph Campbell once said, which is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So it's making peace with these attributes by changing our relationship to these attributes. And if we want to change our relationship regarding poverty, watch the video that I released on Tuesday in which I discuss it. So we change these thinking patterns of what shows up in relation to poverty, criticism of ourselves, which translates over to being overly critical of others, unnecessarily fearing ill health, creating imaginary ills, excessively feeling like you're going to lose love, and as a result of it, it's an opportunity to find it within yourself, feel complete within yourself. Fear of old age, fear of death, any kind of ideas in relation to these kinds of things that seem to show up on the day-to-day journey that break our flow, we can change our thinking surrounding it. So we identify, we simply take notes of what these thought processes are. And number two, we reflect upon the thinking surrounding these flow breakers. And number three, we find the accurate meaning in relation to our goal, vision, who we aspire to be, which is really who we are, which is infinite, which has the ability to create and express and be whatever it is that we desire to be. And so by making peace with these attributes within ourselves, we find ourselves automatically maintaining the flow. For example, fear of poverty. Let's say a person starts working on their business project and they're seeing it all the way to completion. They launch the website and they get it out into the marketplace and they send some visitors over to the website, and very few people or nobody ends up buying. React to it from the perspective of, oh, nobody's buying. I'm always going to fail. Everything I try leads to failure. And then it breaks their flow. So instead of that, they write that down and they say, what's an accurate way of looking at it? Perhaps the accurate way of looking at it is, this is grounds for optimization. Perhaps what I could do is modify this or modify that. They get back into the flow, do those things, they maintain the flow, and then they get ideas, hunches, and inspiration on what to do. And what's interesting also, I found, is people seem to show up. Things seem to happen in the most unexpected ways that contributes to the business growth. All of a sudden, they meet someone that sends a whole bunch of people over to their website. I've seen these things happen within myself and working with others in regards to flow. When someone makes flow a priority, these kinds of things are allowed to happen. We're allowing this to happen. And although, as I say this many times, there are known ways of allowing things to happen, there are also unknown ways that we have not discovered yet. And one of the benefits of being in flow, and one of the reasons why I saw the KPIs, as far as quantitative KPIs, increase, is because of the allowing. So we change our relationship with this inaccurate thinking, doing the subconscious mind work, or whatever it is that we do that works for us. Watch the 2-hour-long video I did on 2022 interpretations of the power of the subconscious mind. I'll put a link in the description. Find the accurate meaning of how you truly are. Identify with that meaning. Identify with those thinking patterns. Allow it to become who you are. Through the inner dialogue, through the affirmation, through the imaginal scene, through the being. And what you will notice is those things won't break your flow anymore. That's how I did it. That's how I was able to maintain the flow. Because the flow breakers, I didn't see them as a problem. I saw them as opportunities to change my inaccurate thinking over to accurate thinking. Because remember, if you go back to the beginning here, it says, I break down independent thought and start people on the habit of drifting by confusing their minds with unprovable ideas concerning a world in which they know nothing. You know yourself, you know your journey. When you produce the success, when you get the business success or whatever it is that you get success in, you're going to see, when you look back, you did it in a very distinct way. Maybe you modeled after others, but there are nuances or even radically different ways that were distinguished by you. You were the one who created those individualized pathways. So again, let's go back to the beginning. It says, I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift. So we're learning how to, and we're encouraging to think for ourselves. While those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. We want to continuously encourage the idea that we have the answers within ourselves. As I had mentioned, and I've had many conversations, we're talking thousands of conversations, I found that every person always knew what to do. They just have perhaps been out of the flow and overly encouraging these thoughts of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love of someone, old age, and death to create within themselves, they're doing it within themselves, clouding the connection between intuition that gives them the idea. So what do? Remember my 3 things that I mentioned a whole bunch of times? We can either change how we relate to the different aspect in relation to flow breakers. We could just accept it the way it is, and it actually first starts with acceptance. We first accept that this is a flow breaker, and it is what it is. And now I have the power to change how I relate to it, see it in harmony and contribution to my vision. Let it be a reaffirmation of my affirmation or my vision. Number 2, maybe decide to accept it the way it is for now. Maybe you have an office and there seems to be this noise that happens. They're doing some construction outside 3 p.m. and it goes on till 5, and then maybe this construction is going to go on for a couple of weeks. You're like, you know what? It's okay. In a couple of weeks, it's going to be done. I'm just going to accept it for now. And then you find that inner peace within yourself and you don't fight it internally. And then you maintain that flow. Or you change it. Maybe you might decide, you know what? I'm going to go work out at a client site at 2 o'clock, or I'm going to go work from a cafe, or I'm just going to go work from home or something like that. But I like to run it through these filters for the different flow breakers, and I recommend doing it as well, because if you do this and you make this a priority, what you'll find is you'll maintain that flow and you will have accelerated progress. And I recommend also reading the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, because he gets into it. Another good book to read as well in relation to flow is The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. He even speaks about the neurotransmitters, which we talked about a while back, that are released, including anandamide. Anandamide, which, by the way, ananda is the Sanskrit word for bliss. The bliss molecule is released when we're in flow. We feel bliss. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and encourage this so that you can make flow a priority and experience an increased effortless progress on the journey to realizing your vision, on your day-to-day journey, whatever it may be. You could say, I recognize that I have the ability to maintain my flow. As a result, I'm able to think for myself more so every day from intuition, guiding me all throughout the journey to realizing my vision. As a result, I have a greater ability to understand and transcend past interpretations in regards to poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death. As a result, my actions and my awareness become one. I feel in flow and automatic in my creative expressions, in my entrepreneurial expressions, in my conversational expression, and my level of being is one with the vision. I know more so every day through making flow a priority and living it exactly who I am. And I know the thinking, the behaviors, and my ways of expressing that are accurate and true to how I really want to see my world. As a result, I'm able to experience autotelic, where actions, activity, and everything feels lighthearted and one. As a result, I feel inner peace, love, and understanding to myself, which is reflected as peace, love, and understanding to others. I realize that I do what I do for doing it itself. I understand what this means more so every day, and I live this way, from a place of Wu Wei. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.